In this video, we're going to practice solving the trigonometric equation by squaring and converting it to a quadratic type. Because sometimes you must square each side of an equation to obtain a quadratic. And because this procedure can introduce extraneous solutions, you want to make sure that you check your solutions in the original equation to see whether they are valid or extraneous solutions. So let's do an example. Here we're going to be finding all of the solutions of the cosine of x plus 1 equaling the sine of x in the interval 0 to 2 pi. So we want to write these all as one trig function. So we want to write them all as sines or all as cosines. And in this case, where they're at right now, we just can't do that. So we're going to begin by squaring each side. So we'll go ahead and we'll square each side here. And so that's going to give us, in this situation, we're going to need to multiply that out. So the cosine x plus 1 times the cosine of x plus 1. And that's going to give us, when we FOIL that and then reduce, the cosine squared of x plus 2 cosine of x plus 1. And then over here on the other side, we have our sine squared of x. Now, remember from the Pythagorean identity, that the sine squared of x equals 1 minus the cosine squared of x. And so we can replace our 1 minus the cosine squared of x for the sine squared of x. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now we want to get everything to the same side. So we're going to add our cosine squared of x to each side. And we're also going to subtract the 1 so we can get rid of those pieces. So that's going to leave us with a 2 times the cosine squared of x plus 2 times the cosine of x equals 0. Now from here, we can see that in our terms, they both have a 2 times the cosine of x. And so we're going to factor that out. So 2 cosine x, and that leaves us with a cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. Now from here we can take this and use the zero product property because we're really just multiplying those two pieces. So we have 2 times the cosine of x equals 0, and we have the cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. So we're going to solve for the cosine of x. So we'll divide here both sides by 2, and that's going to tell us that the cosine of x equals 0. And on the other side, we'll subtract 1 from each side, and that will tell us that the cosine of x equals a negative 1. And so now we're going to look at our unit circle. And so looking at our unit circle, we want to know, where does cosine equal 0? So where is the x value a 0? And we see that that occurs, sorry about that, we see that that occurs here at 0, 1, and it occurs again down here at 0, negative 1. And so we're able to say that the cosine of x equals 0. That's going to tell us that x equals pi over 2, and x equals 3 pi over 2. So what about the one about the cosine of x equaling the negative 1? So here we want to know, where's the x value? A negative 1. And we see that that occurs here at pi. And so we have x equals pi. And so now we need to check our solutions. We need to check all 3 of those, in fact. So we're going to have 3 different checks, and where we're going to plug them into our original equation. Let's check our pi over 2 first. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. So now with them plugged in, the cosine of pi over 2, so we'll go over to pi over 2 and look at the cosine, and it says that the cosine, or the x value, is a 0. And so we know that this is going to be a 0. So we have 0 plus 1, which is 1. And the sine of pi over 2, so we go to the y value at pi over 2, which is a 1. And so this is going to be a 1. So we'll write that down. And it is true, in fact, that 1 does equal 1. So x equals pi over 2 is a solution. Now let's check our second solution of 3 pi over 2. So let's plug that in. So now that we have that plugged in, we want to go to where the cosine of 3 pi over 2 is. So we're going to go to 3 pi over 2, which is right here, and we're going to look at the x value there. And the x value there is 0. So that's going to be a 0 plus 1, which is 1. And now we're going to look to the y value of that same spot, which is negative 1. And so we have set equal to negative 1, and that does not work. So this is going to be extraneous, which means that it is not a solution. So that's not going to work. So now let's check our pi. So let's go ahead and plug that in. So we're going to go to our unit circle to pi, and it says the cosine, so that's going to be our x value, which is negative 1. So we have negative 1 plus 1, which is 0. And then we're going to go to the y value at pi, which is 0. And so we see that we get 0 equals 0, which is correct. And so that is going to be a solution. And so we have our two solutions, which is x equals pi over 2 and x equals pi. And really you only need to box them one time. So if you box them up here, then you're done. But if you want to rewrite them in this format, you can as well. And those are our solutions.